Our solar system did not have the configuration that it does today. The original configuration, the Earth was the second position from the Sun after the planet Mercury. After the Earth was the planet Mars, then came Jupiter, then a large planet that was called Maldek, then Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. That was all that existed in the solar system originally. Now, if we go back into the deeper part of the galaxy, there was only one large star system that was inhabited, and that was the Lyrian star system, which you can see on your star charts. The Lyrian star system, for all intents and purposes, was the origin of all human life forms. In our galaxy, 70% of the life forms are human or humanoid, 25% are reptilian or reptoid, and 5% are variations of those and other type of creatures. Now, back then there was a star system, and there still is, called the Draco star system, which can be seen mostly from the southern hemisphere. This was colonized by or inhabited by reptilian beings who had quite a large empire. They were androgynous beings, meaning male and female in one body. There was no differentiation of the sexes. These reptilians had a mind pattern or a belief system that made them feel an obligation to conquer and absorb other life forms wherever they would find it. The reasons that they had were twofold. On one hand, they believed that because they were androgynous, they most closely represented spirituality or God mind, because once you go out of physical reality, there is no male-female, there is simply energy. That was the first part. Second part is, and we can see this on the Earth today, if you look at reptilian genetics over eons of time, it does not change or hardly changes at all. And so, from their perspective, because their genetics does not change over eons of time, to them proved that they were more closely aligned to the God mind and did not need to change. Whereas mammalian life forms constantly needed to change and adapt and evolve, which to their minds proved them to be inferior. So they felt an obligation to absorb all other life forms that they could find and reptilianize them. And this is what they did. When they came upon the Lyrian star system, it was attacked. The star system was almost completely obliterated. The refugees scattered out to many of the other star systems in our galaxy and created colonies that still exist today and have developed into other civilizations. In our solar system here, 2 planets were colonized. One was the planet Mars, which at that time had oceans and atmosphere, and the other one was Maldek, which was the planet after Mars. It was a very large planet that had an atmosphere and very large oceans. So there was conditions suitable for human life form. And these colonies existed for many thousands of years until the Draco Empire found them. Now the Draco use weapons that are hollowed out comets, meteors, and large objects that they can hurl through space as weapons. They pull them by creating small black holes in front of them which direct their direction and path. And so, when they discovered the colonies on Mars and Maldek, they sent a very large ice comet into this solar system. As the ice comet passed the planet Uranus, it created an effect on the spin of Uranus that caused it to tilt. It's the only known planet or object in space that rotates north to south instead of east to west like all other objects rotate. This was because of the pull of the ice comet as it passed. Now, the problem began as the ice comet approached Jupiter and Maldek. The gravitational pull of those 3 objects combining created a situation where the planet Maldek exploded and created the asteroid field that now exists between Mars and Jupiter. And then it continued on very close to Mars, pulling off most of the atmosphere and the oceans of Mars, causing the inhabitants who survived to go into the interior or hollow section of that planet. Science today tells us that at one time in the distant past, Mars did have a very thick atmosphere and oceans like the Earth does today. As the ice comet continued on, it went into a revolution between what was then the planet Earth, which at the time was covered completely in liquid atmosphere, liquid surface, very little land above this, above the water. As the spin continued, the oceans were pulled off and polarized, creating the ice caps that we have today. Then the ice comet and the Earth shifted positions so that the ice comet then took up the second position from the sun, and the Earth was pushed into the third position. The heat from the sun at that point melted the ice on the comet, which created the cloud fields that we now know on what has become the planet Venus. So in effect, Venus was an ice comet that was pushed into this solar system, melted the ice, evaporated it, and created the thick clouds that we have around Venus today. In the late 1980s, the Soviet Union sent a spacecraft with a very strong camera and transmitter below the cloud surface of Venus. This was the very first time that a spacecraft was able to transmit photographs from the surface of Venus before burning up or losing the transmission. What they discovered on the surface of Venus were 7 domed areas, very equal in size and completely round. This was reported on the front page of the Los Angeles Times, front page of New York Times. Of course, the information came from the Soviet Union. And so, of course, they described these objects as looking very artificial, perfectly round. And then at the very end of the article, it said that NASA has determined that these are natural formations, which of course they were not. If you know about Draco civilization, you know that there are 7 different reptilian species, each in a hierarchy. They do not mix together. And so they would live in separate areas on the surface of such a world. And they would have to be domed in order to create life conditions. So, background of that is what we know about Venus. The Earth then had, because of the polarization of the oceans, land was able to rise or be seen above the surface of the water. Now, at that time, the reptilians drove in another object to the solar system in order to colonize this newly formed landmass. We call that new object the Moon. The Moon is an artificial object. It's hollow, and it is artificially created. When NASA and the Soviet Union sent sonic resonance off the surface of the Moon, it pinged like glass, proving it was hollow, instead of thumping that a solid object would have. Recently, you know, science has told us that there are anomalies on the Moon. They even said there might even be a thin atmosphere, and they've recently tried to test for water. These, of course, stories are for public consumption. However, they know what is in the Moon and what is on the surface of the Moon. On any clear night, on a full moon, if you have a telescope with at least a 60 times magnification, you can train it on any crater on that moon, and you will see building, materials, lights, moving objects. You will see activity on the moon. Any one of you who has a telescope can do this. You should also realize, if you look at the craters on the moon, why are there no depressions? All the craters are flat. If the craters were literally formed by asteroids or other rocks bombarding it, why is there no debris field? Why are there no openings or holes where they crashed onto the moon? The craters have flat bottoms. You will also notice debris on the surface of the moon, which scientists from the government many years ago had determined were leftover debris from some type of a battle or war that took place on the surface of the moon many eons ago. And unbeknownst to most people, in the late 1950s, because of technology that both the Soviet Union and the United States received from alien civilizations, the moon was colonized as early as 1957 and still is occupied.